Information possesses several dimensions of value, including as a commodity, as a means of education, as a means to influence, and as a means of negotiating and understanding the world. In addition to this, legal and socioeconomic interests influence information production and dissemination. So let's talk about the different kinds of value that information can have. Information can be valuable as a commodity. It can be bought and sold. Think celebrity tabloids, books, intellectual property rights. Information has value in terms of education. Education is valuable in and of itself, right? A person with a higher degree makes a lot more money over the course of their lifetime than somebody with only a high school education. Information is valuable as a means of persuasion, right? To try to convince somebody of an argument. You can present them with different kinds of information and get them on your side. And information helps us understand the world that we live in, and that understanding creates stability and value of another kind. You want to use this frame to better understand information by asking questions before you read, asking questions as you read, considering different kinds of value as you look for sources to use in your research project, and being clear when you incorporate sources into your paper, right? That's that idea of respecting the fact that information has value and that intellectual property belongs to the person who created it. I'm going to pause there for just a second because I want to tell you a story. So a few years ago, I was having lunch with my mother and my daughter, who at the time was about 7 or 8, and my daughter asked if she could have soda. And, we try to be health conscious, so sometimes, but it was just like a special occasion, right? So I was like, sure, go for it. And, and then my mother goes, oh, careful. You don't want to get depressed. And I was like, what? Are you, My voice gets all high when my mom says something weird, and then I'm like, want to question her but not get in a fight. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. So then she tells me that she gets this health newsletter, and in this health newsletter she read an article about a connection, a link between soda and depression. And I was like, that's interesting. Maybe you could send me that article. Fine. Okay. Rest of lunch, normal, nothing weird happens. When I get home later that day, she sends me the link to the article. Except it's not really an article. It's like an e-newsletter from this site called Mercola.com. I'm like, all right, I've never heard of this, but whatever. Look through the newsletter. It's full of hot links, right? And hot links are when people are trying to get you to buy stuff. So, there's all kinds of things in this newsletter. There's herbal supplements and salt that makes you skinny and oils and stuff. So I'm like, all right, this is a little weird, right? Thinking about information that's having value and thinking about, going upstream from a source. So I click through to the article, right? And then I'm on this Mercola site where, again, they're just trying to sell me so much crap. But I find the article, I read through it. It's still pretty dubious. I'm like, okay, I don't know about this. But at the very bottom of the article, there's a link to WebMD. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I click through to WebMD. And WebMD is a pretty reputable site. It's still public facing, right? It's not scholarly or anything, but usually pretty reliable. And then the article on WebMD explains that this was this very small study done in Sweden with 18 elderly patients, and they found a link between diet soda consumption and rates of depression. But, and the WebMD article makes this very clear, there wasn't causality, right? They couldn't tell from the study whether one caused the other or whether people just drank more soda because they were sad. So basically it was totally inconclusive. So I emailed my mother back, trying to be very polite. It did not go well, by the way. She did not want to be fact-checked, it turned out. So save your fact-checking for class. But the point of the story here is that my mother took this information at face value, right? And because it was kind of what she wanted to hear. So you're thinking about that bias too, right? Thinking about confirming things you already think are true. Soda is bad for you. Therefore, of course, it makes sense that it causes depression. But really, a bit questionable, right? So she didn't fact check it. She didn't look any deeper. She just sort of assumed that this source that she trusted was telling her the truth. But in fact, upon closer examination, they really weren't. And then, of course, because I'm me, I did like even more digging. Dr. Mercola, Google him if you want like a little rabbit hole adventure. Strange character. But anyway, point of the story is always verify your sources, right? Always double check that information and make sure that what you're using is 100% accurate. All right, back to our information has value. You want to consider the value of information as you work on your project. And this is a really important one, right? So think about the purpose of the information. That's going to help you figure out who it's valuable to. What are they trying to accomplish? Are they trying to sell you something? Are they trying to convince you of something? What is the value of the information that you're looking at? Who has access to this information? Is it something that only the elite can access? Is it something that everybody has access to? And then think about the purpose and accessibility and value of the information as influencing your understanding of that information. So once you understand better the purpose, who has access, and the value of the information, then you have a clearer idea of what you're dealing with, right? And finally, as I said before, you want to honor the intellectual property of others by always citing all of your information. The other piece of this is to remember that socioeconomic interests influence information production and dissemination. In other words, the people who are in power have a vested interest in maintaining that power and reinforcing dominant narratives that sort of justify why things are the way that they are and tell the story the way they want to. They have a reputation to protect, right? Reputation equals money. They have a vested interest in maintaining that status and protecting their reputations. On the other hand, information can also have value if it is dangerous or subversive, because that's also powerful/valuable. Information possesses several dimensions of value, including as a commodity, as a means of education, as a means to influence, and as a means of negotiating and understanding the world. Legal and socioeconomic interests influence information production and dissemination.